What's going on, everyone? Dendrite here, back with the second episode of OTR, back with the second episode of Off the Record. Going to be another chill one today. This one's actually going to talk about my ethical hacking setup. Just going to go through all of the tools and the scripts and the different software that I use on my laptop, since that is what I work on mainly. This comes as a request from cdub_music on Instagram, so thank you for leaving the comment. And now to kick off, in terms of what I use a Lenovo IdeaPad, which I bought a long time ago now. I think I paid about $1,800 or something a few years ago, so it was quite expensive for me at the time, but it's been really good. I've taken it with me to the US, I've taken it with me to Thailand. It's survived a lot of plane trips, it's survived airports, being knocked around inside my luggage. I did actually nearly lose it in Thailand because I left my backpack in the backseat of the cab and I didn't realize it, but I did get it back. So as far as this laptop goes, it's solid and it has copped a lot of abuse, and I'm amazed that it is still running. In terms of the software that I actually have installed, I actually use Windows as the main operating system. And I know I'm going to get a lot of Linux bros throwing shit at me in the comments, likely because I use Windows. And when I initially started making content, Clipchamp is just what I used because it was installed by default, and now I've set everything up on Clipchamp. So I've got all my templates, my music library, my sound effects and whatever. So everything is built into Clipchamp to support content production through that, and moving it would just be too much of a pain and I get nothing out of it, so I'm sticking with Windows for now. As far as the hacking side of things goes, I do actually use virtual machines. I use WSL2. So I use WSL2 Kali Linux, which is available on the Microsoft Store. And I use that firstly because the install is very minimal. It does not take a lot of storage. I think it was only about 200 megabytes when I installed it last. And so I do actually have a bash script and a Python script on my GitHub that will install the most commonly used tools. And most of the tools I use within Kali are command line based, so there's no need for a GUI. I do have a GUI package installed for WSL2. I use Kali Kex, or I think the package name might be WinKex. It just installs a front end and you can click around the desktop and open up applications like you would with a normal full install. But I barely use it because the command line is enough. I actually have Docker Desktop installed on my machine. I like to compartmentalize things when I can, just because it helps me to keep my machine tidy. And one of my main tools that I use through Kali, which is Recon FTW, I actually run that as a Docker container that is run through Docker Desktop. And because I have the WSL2 integration enabled in Docker Desktop, I can run Recon FTW and run entire scans through the command line in WSL2. And then I have I've set up persistence, I've set up volume storage for that container. So I can just sign into that container and retrieve the results, which is really cool. And if you don't know what Recon FTW is, it is a reconnaissance framework. So it is a framework that has a bunch of different pen testing tools installed, and you run it against a target or a series of targets, and it will perform all kinds of recon on it. It will perform OSINT, host enumeration, subdomains. It will perform fuzzing. It will gather screenshots for you. So Recon FTW is designed to be this all-in-one recon framework. And the reason I run it in a Docker container is to keep things clean, because if something breaks or I have to reinstall something, it's easier just to delete the Docker container and do a Docker pull or a Docker run commands to re-download the container, as opposed to trying to fix broken dependencies all the time, because that could be a huge time sink, especially if you're working with Linux. Which is why I don't touch Arch Linux. Anyway, FTW is mostly what I use for my initial first pass when it comes to Recon. nuclei as well. I use the nuclei vulnerability scanner and nuclei templates as well. And those are all available through the Project Discovery GitHub repo. In terms of spidering, in terms of subdomain enumeration, web crawling screenshots, I do also have a few of the tools on WSL2 as well, even though they're already installed on the Recon FTW Docker container. So the Docker container is great, but sometimes you need to be a bit more surgical. Sometimes you only want to run one or two tools. And so pointing a gigantic recon framework that can, in some cases, take days to finish at a target, you're taking a sledgehammer to a tool that requires a scalpel. So Docker container for a rough first pass, and then having the tools also installed on WSL2 to go in deeper and to dig deeper. So I have Asset Finder and Subfinder that I tend to run as sanity checks, just for subdomain enumeration, just to see if there was anything else that Recon FTW missed. And then I feed that through to HTTPX Toolkit, which is another tool from Project Discovery. Honestly, just go to the Project Discovery GitHub repo and just star and fork everything, because their stuff is great. So subdomain enumeration, pass it to HTTPX to see what's alive. And then from there, I feed everything through to Wayback URLs. And it'll go back through the Wayback Machine and a few other resources as well to find different URLs, find different endpoints that people might have forgotten about. And I also run Katana as well, which is a web spider. In terms of GUI, tools with a GUI, I do actually have Burp Suite, the Burp Suite Community Edition installed on my host Windows system. The Community Edition of Burp Suite is very limited, and I only use it for certain CTFs and certain labs. If I'm actually hunting on a live target, I will use OWASP Zap or Zap Proxy, which is very similar to Burp Suite. It's got a lot of the same tools. It is a different graphical user interface in terms of layout, so it can take some time to get comfortable with, and learning a new software is kind of a pain, but it is generally better than the Burp Suite Free Edition. Nmap as well is another tool I'm very reliant on. I know there are other port scanners out there. Nmap was the first port scanner I used, so that's what I have stuck with. I have it installed on Kali as well as my host operating system. In terms of software that I have actually paid for, the only one I've really paid for is Shodan. So occasionally Shodan will do sales where you can get a lifetime license and get a pretty generous search quota for like $5 as an outright fee, so very handy for a lot of things. I've got Wireshark installed as well. I barely ever use it, but I have got some networking videos and things like that in the works, so I will be using Wireshark for that. I like to use Obsidian. I used to use Notion, but it was so slow and I had so much stuff within Notion. I had everything in there. Pen testing notes, I had notes to self, I had video scripts, content ideas, calendar reminders, all of this stuff. And Notion was just so slow and it was so terrible as a user experience. I just switched to Obsidian, and I pay like $70 a year for Obsidian Sync, which, given the amount of value that it gives me, is nothing. I have Git Bash installed as well. So Git and the Bash terminal emulator for Windows, because I'm used to the Linux environment. VoiceBox as well comes in really handy for generating audio for YouTube videos and whatnot. You can think of VoiceBox as an open source version of 11 Labs. So you just type in your video script and it will produce a voiceover in your voice. I have another tool called Handy, which is an open source transcription tool. I talk faster than I type, and Handy will download these local small AI models to your machine like Parakeet V2 or Parakeet V3, and you just hold down a couple of hotkeys, you speak into the mic, and it will transcribe into Obsidian, into Notion, into Google Docs, whatever you prefer to work with. I use N8N as well. That's another reason that Docker Desktop comes in handy, is that it can host N8N for me, and I can have all my automations just within that container without having to stuff around with package dependencies and other things like that. So I've built out some handy automations for myself. Non-infosec related, but they do save me a ton of time with content creation. Vibe is another open source tool that I use. It's kind of like 11 Labs, but it is only for transcription. So you upload a particular audio file or a folder full of audio files, and it will just transcribe it using whatever given model that you choose. I think I'm using one of the Whisper models at the moment. I also have Oracle VirtualBox installed, and the reason I have it, and I have a separate Kali Linux install on VirtualBox, is because WSL2 shits itself when it comes to working with network adapters, or at least it has for me in the past. So I have an alpha Wi-Fi adapter, and the chipset within it, it's capable of mono to mode packet injection. So if you're using Airmon, NG, Aircrack, Kismet, that whole suite of Wi-Fi pen testing tools, just being able to plug it into a minimal Kali install on VirtualBox is way easier than trying to do USB pass-through with WSL2. It saves me a lot of time. For the coding side of things, I use Visual Studio Code just because it's quick, it's fast, it's really customizable, it has a lot of plugins. I also have Visual Studio installed as well, but that's really more a full IDE. That's really more of a full environment. If I'm occasionally writing C or C++, then everything within Visual Studio is there for me ready to go. But for the day-to-day, just writing quick and dirty Python scripts, I use Visual Studio Code. Another one to mention is Ollama, and that's going to feed into a couple of other things as well. So I have only a few small Ollama AI local models on my local machine, and the only reason I have those is for coding assistance with Visual Studio Code. So I have Qwen 2.5 Coda 7B that I use for autocomplete and coding assistance within Visual Studio, and I use the Continue plugin. The plugin itself is literally called Continue, and then it interacts with those AI models for coding assistance and autocomplete and things like that. Because I don't feel like wasting money on Codex or Copilot or whatever other subscriptions people are using. I'm honestly getting AI fatigue at this point. Every time I open up X or Instagram, some job got eliminated, some new Claude skill nuked an entire industry. I'm just getting sick of it. I use it because I have to, but I don't enjoy it. But so many targets are so individualized, you're going to need to run, you're going to need to download and delete tools a lot. There's no sense in doing a full Kali Linux install and getting this entire bloated install with hundreds and hundreds of tools if you're only going to use like 10 or 20 of them. And there were a lot of tools I skipped over, like SQL map and Metasploit and things like that. I have those within Kali as well, but I don't use them a ton. I delete and reinstall tools as I need them, because targets change, tech stacks change, and I just need to keep my environment adaptable and keep it changing to the task that I'm performing at the time. And last one to finish off, I use a tool called WinDirStat. So it's a free open source tool that lets you visualize which programs and files are taking up your storage. And that is all I have for today, everyone, in terms of ethical hacking and the InfoSec stuff. Hopefully you all got something useful out of it. If anyone has any topic requests, if anyone has any suggestions for videos that you'd like me to cover, leave it in the comments below. I do my best to read all of the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll be back with episode 3 of OTR really soon. See ya.